Hello and welcome to this CIE IGCSE History Exam Masterclass Revision Session 2. In this masterclass, we will be looking at the skills required to succeed in Paper 2. That's your sources paper. Let's show the examiners how great you are. Okay, let's get started. First off, you should know that there are a total of 50 marks available. And as a rule, you should be aiming at 35 out of 50 as a minimum score for this paper come examination time. It changes every year, but generally speaking, 25 out of 50 is around about a grade C, and 35 out of 50 is normally around a grade A. This paper is worth 33% of your overall IGCSE grade, which is about 3 whole grades. As we've said, it's your source paper, and you should consider this your easy marks if you know how. Promise. You will be given 2 hours to answer a range of questions, normally 6, on your nominated topic. This year, for my students, the nominated topic is the Gulf States, and next year, for my students, the nominated topic is the League of Nations. However, you should be really certain of what your nominated topic is and make sure that you ask your teacher if you don't know already. Marks are given in brackets at the end of a question, and this paper is a test of your skill. It's a bit like building up muscles. The more you practice, the better it gets. And you wouldn't go into a bodybuilding competition without having worked out first, would you? So practice really does make perfect. Now, be aware that there are different types of question you can be asked. It's not as straightforward as a paper 1 in the sense that in a paper 1 you know exactly how many marks there are for each question for parts A, B and C, and you pretty much know the type of question that will be asked. But the same questions do come up year after year, and in this masterclass we'll go through some of these shortly. If you know what they are and you know how to respond to them, you will be really well positioned for Paper 2 success. There are a whole heap of past Paper 2s about a variety of topics. If you haven't already got a set, make sure you ask your teacher for as many as possible. Now, something people often forget is that there will be 2 topics in your Paper 2 exam. One of them will probably mean nothing to you because you haven't studied it. So don't make the cardinal sin of wasting time reading through it. Go straight to the nominated topic that you know about. Now, I can't say this enough really, but you must read the source paper carefully. Don't be tempted to start writing straight away. This is the single biggest factor in determining your success come exam day. So you should set aside a reasonable amount of time, perhaps even a full 10 minutes, to sit down, draw on, annotate, label, and think about the sources in front of you. Some questions will ask you to use your own knowledge, and where they do, you must do so. But even where it doesn't, you can still use your own knowledge to place a source in context. Now, because you know what your nominated topic is, you should have revised a set of key, crucial dates, possibly turning points or acceleration points. And I would advise that as soon as you get an exam, you write these down on the front cover in shorthand form. Therefore, when you are looking at the provenance or background of the source, which is normally in italics at the bottom of a page, you'll be able to refer back to this and place each source in context of what happened before and after it. This is the kind of skill that helps you get to the top end of the mark scheme. Now, I know this sounds obvious, but it is a source paper, so use the sources. I once had a great student with outstanding subject knowledge who did a whole paper too without making reference to the sources at all, and as you can imagine, he didn't do very well. So this is an exam about your source skills. You must use the sources. Now, there's a variety of techniques you can adopt when using sources. It's okay to write on them using the whirl method. The whirl method, for those of you who aren't aware, is an acronym to break down a source in terms of what does it show you, how much information is there in the source, how reliable is it, and what links can you make to other sources. Or if you prefer, you can use the 5Ws1H method, which is who, when, where, why, what, and how. For picture sources, some students also find it useful to divide a source into 4 sections, like the crosshairs in the lens in the picture. It's also very good practice when you're reading through the sources just to write a P or an S next to each source to remind you if it's primary or secondary. Okay, we spoke earlier about context, and we said that you should draw on your short timeline of key events which you will have revised. Time Toast is a fantastic tool on the internet for doing this. Context is crucial when referring to the provenance or origin, in italics at the bottom. And remember, you can't just infer from the source, you can also infer from the provenance. So ask yourself what came before and after it and use the dates. Have a look at this example. Now, this was a source question from one of my students about the Hungarian Rising in the Cold War in 1956. And what I really liked about this answer, as you can see from the highlights and the circle, is the sentence where it says, at this point, Hungary had a ... and also, it was also 5 months after ... So excellent use of contextual knowledge. It's important that you make sure you leave enough time for the big 12-mark final question. This is the easiest question in the entire paper, surprisingly, and we will deal with it separately. But do heed the advice given later about marking each source with a Y or an N at the beginning of the exam, to show if the source does or does not agree with the statement in the 12-mark question. This is how the examiners mark it, so you might as well be doing it yourself. It will make your life a lot easier come the end of the exam. Okay, some more basics. You don't get much time in the exam, and many students always make the mistake of writing loads and loads for questions 1 and 2 and running out of time at the end. So, to make sure you get straight to the point, you should always answer the question in your very first sentence, every time, and this should be considered a golden rule. It's one of the best pieces of advice you will ever get. Okay, let's look at another example. Have a look at this question 4. It's from the same question about the Hungarian uprising from a different student. And you can see that I've commented here that I like how they answer it in the first sentence. Nicely done. It reads, source G does not give a useful message as much as source H does. So it's straight to the point, answers the question, and it doesn't have to worry about long introductions or conclusions. Okay, another point, when you're looking at sources, don't just accept them at face value, and instead you should infer from the source. Read between the lines and identify what you can learn from it. As we've already said, it's important that you infer from both the source itself and the provenance. Have a look at this fantastic answer. Now, don't be too worried by how much the student has written. This was a take-home paper. But I've highlighted in this question, or response rather, some of the excellent terms that show the student is not just accepting a source at face value, but that they are inferring from the source. So let's go through them. Source A portrays. The ringleader portrays. The whip held by Khrushchev illustrates. Also, the illustration conveys. This illustration corresponds with. The entire illustration expresses how. This cartoon further represents. So many layers of inference and analysis, and this is what you should be aiming for in your source work. Let's have a look at a second question. Again, this is about the Hungary paper. Look at the words underlined. The source consists of bears which represent. The wildness of this animal, also this suggests. All the states seem to be doing what they are told except for Hungary. This suggests. Hungary, located in the middle, suggests that it was of central importance. And I've written that this is a quality hinged term. Khrushchev's hand suggests violence. This can be used to represent. All are located in a cage, suggesting the satellite states are imprisoned. Okay, so some excellent inferences, deluxe inferences. Another tip is to refer directly to the source. For example, source A states. Don't expect the examiner to know that you have referred to it. In the mark schemes, it clearly says you will not be credited for source use that is not clear. So be clear. When lifting from the source, there is no need to copy out large chunks. You're credited with the same amount of marks for a 2-word quotation as a 20-word quotation. So just quote a word or 3 and make sure you use quotation marks. If you are using your own knowledge, make this clear. For example, state, "From my own knowledge I can add." Again, have a look at this student paper. It's really clear to the examiner that the information they are putting in is not just something taken from face value from the sources, but excellent independent knowledge that they have brought to the table in the exam, and they will be credited for this. So be explicit and state, "From my own knowledge." It's important that you make sure you know what types of sources will come up. There will almost certainly be a political cartoon, or a speech, or a history textbook. There is absolutely no reason for you to be thinking about how these are valuable or asking yourself what their limitations are for the first time in the exam itself. So you should know this already. So if you haven't done so, you should take time to list all of the key sources and complete an OPVL on each. OPVL stands for origin, purpose, value, and limitations of a source. So I would strongly advise you take a past paper, go through each type of source, whether it's a diary, a journal, a newspaper, a photograph, a painting, a telex message, whatever it happens to be, and just make sure you can give the O, P, V and L of each. Okay, now on to the meat of the exam. It's important to know the kinds of question that come up and to check how you should answer them. We will deal with these separately now. One type of question that comes up often is, study two sources. How similar are they? Now, with all questions 1 to 5, I recommend 2 paragraphs. One that answers and agrees with the question, and one that disagrees. So for this type of question, and to score highly, you should aim to describe and interpret the sources and to compare them. In other words, tell the examiner what is the same in both in one paragraph, and then what is different in both in another. So 2 good paragraphs should be enough to get you the full quota of marks here. It's also important to consider the author's tone in this kind of a question and to refer directly to him or her. Another question you may get are to study 2 sources and be asked how similar were the reasons for making these sources. Again, 2 paragraphs will suffice, one to show they are similar and one to show they're not. Place them in context, use your own knowledge, the provenance, and refer directly to the person who made it. For those of you who have League of Nations as your nominated topic, it's well worth researching David Lowe, the New Zealand-born artist, in some detail because he's a popular favourite of the exam. And it's good to have a bit of knowledge about where he worked and possibly his character Musla and so on. And explain who their audience is and what the impact on them would be. Another type of question that often comes up is, study this source, and does this source prove something? Use the source and your own knowledge. Again, keep it simple and straightforward. 2 good paragraphs, yes and no, using the sources and your own knowledge. Answers hitting the highest level will cross-reference the sources. You then get reliability questions. Again, 2 paragraphs. Yes, this is more reliable. Then no, it's not more reliable. You must infer from the sources and place them in context. This is where your OPVL from earlier comes in handy. Comment on the origin, purpose, value and limitations of both sources before arriving at a quick judgment which is clear. Comment on the content and provenance as well as the intended audience. Okay, now this is a question that sometimes throws students, and it's when you get 3 sources in a question. So for example, do sources X and Y agree or disagree with source Z? Again, keep it to 2 paragraphs, even if it's about 3 sources. You must use all 3 sources, that's very important, and you must cross-reference them all. But again, a shortish answer can get you a high score. You really should practice this one. So in the first paragraph, explain how the sources agree, and then in the second one, how they disagree. Also, it's important to remember to answer the question in the first sentence, just like this question here does. Okay, a lot of my students in the past have always struggled with this question, so it's worth us taking our time and thinking about it in a bit more detail. And it's the how surprised are you question. This is where you need to explain what you think based on your own knowledge and the source itself. Think back to what we said about timelines and the use of the provenance. You should aim to write 2 paragraphs again. Yes, I am surprised because, and no, I am not surprised because. When using the source, consider tone, artistic devices, audience, etc. Okay, so finally we have what I called the easiest question on the paper, and that's question 6, the big question worth 12 marks at the end. For this question, you will always have a statement, followed by how far do the sources agree with this statement. As we've said, it's always worth 12 marks, so it's important to get it right and to get your timing spot on. Now, as we've said, when an examiner marks this, they are told to label your answer with a Y or an N next to each paragraph. So it's useful to have gone through the sources at the start, and this is why you'll be grateful you made a quick plan like the one below to help you. So for my source paper, I've gone through and decided that A, B, F and I all agree, that C, D and G disagree, and that H both agrees and disagrees. And when I write my paragraphs up, this will make my life a lot easier. So you should go through each source now one at a time, writing one quick paragraph, 3 or 4 sentences fine for each. Also, as always, leave a line between each point. Now, when answering this question, my advice is that you should do this first for those that do agree, and then say on the other hand there are some sources, and do the same for those that don't agree. And as we've said, you may wish to have a third section for those that agree and disagree. But if you only agree or disagree, no matter how good your source work and analysis, you will top out at 6 marks maximum. And remember, you should conclude by saying what you think overall. Even just a single sentence is fine for this. And if you've done this really well, you will have gained 10 out of 12 marks so far. So, how do I get the extra 2 bonus marks, I hear you cry? I'm glad you asked. To get the 2 missing bonus marks, you need to have commented on the OPVL, origin, purpose, value and limitations of any 2 of the sources that you have used. Make this really clear when you do so, and tell the examiner what you are doing. Have a look at this example here, which was taken from a paper 2 about the Korean War. It reads, the source had originated from a newspaper which in most cases embed biased views into their news pieces. Its purpose was utilising anti-capitalist rhetoric to portray America as being an aggressor. The source lends the perspective of the Chinese as the South Korean troops had neared their borders. However, the newspaper article may have been used to boost morale for the war and is therefore an exaggerated depiction. Now, this was a take-home response. Your OPVL wouldn't need to be as detailed, but do make it as clear and as obvious to the examiner as possible, and do it twice. Okay, thank you very much for listening to this Paper 2 workshop. I hope that you got something out of it, even if it was just a reassurance that you know exactly what to do for the exam. And if you have any questions or worries at all, you can look for further advice on my YouTube channel, or you can follow me on Twitter at Mr. Guiney History. Good luck and work hard on your Paper 2 technique. You really do now have all the tools needed for success in this crucial paper. Now go use them. Bye bye.